Hey guys, Nico here. Today I wanted to dive into an interesting topic of artificial intelligence. Recently today, Elon Musk reposted a video of Geoffrey Hinton, one of the smartest people in the world, also known as the godfather of artificial intelligence to many, was recently interviewed by John L. Richmond, who's a news anchor at Bloomberg, and they did a really great job. And in this video, Joffrey goes over some really interesting points regarding artificial intelligence and how it's moving at such a quick, lightning fast pace, and almost a concerning pace, I would say, one that is faster than most people and governments can keep up with when it comes to regulation and things like that. And he points out that that might be a weakness humans have against AI long term when it comes to AI becoming more and more smart or smarter than humans longer term, and that today we need to be more conscientious of how we're developing the AI overall. So today I wanted to watch this video, give you guys my thoughts in between it all, and just really educate you guys on really this guy's perspective, because I think he has some excellent things to say that most people should definitely know, as over time AI will become a larger and larger part of our lives. So let's start giving this guy a watch.
In the spring of 2023, last year, I began to realize that these digital intelligences we're building might just be a lot better form of intelligence than us. And we had to take seriously the idea they were going to get smarter than us, and maybe within the next 20 years or so. And so we needed now to think seriously about, could we control them? Before that, I thought it would be much longer, and so we didn't need to worry about it right now. And many people still think they're just statistical tricks and they don't really understand what they're saying. I think that's quite wrong. So I came out and focused on the existential threat, that is the idea that they'll take over from people, because many people were saying it was science fiction, and I no longer believe it's science fiction.
And I think Joffrey brings up a really great point here. And he doesn't want to come out and do this. He feels like he has to. He's seeing that there is a risk to this new technology that we're building. And in my perspective, I see artificial intelligence as this great filter that humans are going to have to make their way through, kind of like nuclear bombs and other things in the past, where like this technology is so powerful and insane, it's going to be a great filter. We either make it through alive or we don't. And there will be huge challenges through all this. And if we're going to make it through, we need to be conscientious of what steps we take going forward. And when it comes to great filters, I mean, there could be other societies out there in the universe or whatever that hit the same exact point of building this artificial intelligence, or this basically like this tool that we can use that can either be used for good or bad. And we're facing that same exact moment, and it will be considered a filter over the long term that that the human race will either make its way through or not.
Do it earlier, but just remind us how quickly this technology is moving, in your opinion.
It's moving very fast. The best way to understand how fast it's moving is to look at what it was like 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you told people that today we would have a language understanding system where you could ask it anything at all and it would give you an answer about as good as a not very good expert, people would have said, no, we're not going to get that in 10 years. That's crazy. People have been working on natural language processing for 50 years, and this would be a huge advance. Well, we're there. So what we're going to get in 10 years' time is plausibly that difference again, and that's going to be superintelligence. So my guess is there's a 50-50 chance that we'll get it within the next 20 years. Almost every decent.
And I think this is absolutely crucial for people to get. And I don't think that humans have really evolved to think this way, but what's going on here is this artificial development, what humans are working on building this next creation that we call AI. It's something that's exponential. And if you were to plot it on a graph over time, over the last 50 years and over the next 50 years, it is an extreme exponential graph when it comes to computing power and exponential functionality. And over the next 10, 20, 30 years, where on that graph is the crossing point when AI becomes smarter than a human? Because it will happen, and Joffrey's just saying it's moving so fast that his time frame of when that point is going to be is shortening. He no longer thinks it's going to be 20, 30 or 50 years out. He thinks it's within the next 10 or 20 years at most, it sounds like.
Researcher I know believes that in the long run it'll get more intelligent than us. It's not going to stop at our intelligence. A few people believe that, but because it's training on data from us at present. But most of the researchers I know are fairly confident it will get more intelligent than us. So the real question is, how long will that take? And when it does, will we still be able to keep control?
And the possibility of it being smarter than us or smarter than us in the not too distant future, what is the determining factor of that?
Well, what we know is that as you make these things bigger, they get smarter. So if you take something like GPT-4, which is bigger than GPT-3, GPT-4 is quite a lot smarter. It answers a whole bunch of questions correctly that GPT-3 would get wrong. We know that if you make it bigger still, it's going to get better. So we know that these things will get more intelligent just by making them bigger. But we also know there's always scientific advances. So in addition to them getting more intelligent by being made bigger, we'll have scientific breakthroughs. So in 2017, there was a breakthrough called transformers, and that made these things much better. And we'll get more breakthroughs like that.
So if
And I couldn't agree more here with Joffrey. When it comes to the AI's ability to keep advancing and get smarter than a human, which he believes that it will eventually, that's just an inflection point we cannot predict at what point in the future that happens or what that looks like. So we need to be very aware or mindful of what we're doing today, right? So let's keep watching.
technology is getting smarter, and there is that possibility of it being smarter than humans, this is where I guess some of the things you've been talking about come into play. What are the risks associated with that, in your opinion?
Okay, so how many examples can you tell me about where a more intelligent thing is controlled by a less intelligent thing?
Not a long list.
Right, not since Biden got elected.
That's a good one.
So basically a mother and baby is the only example I can think of. And evolution put huge amounts of work into allowing the baby to control the mother. Evolution made the sound of a baby crying just intolerable for the mother, things like that. But basically, less intelligent things do not control more intelligent things. Now, some people think these kind of intelligences we're making will be very different from us because they didn't evolve. My friend...
Very, very scary point that Joffrey's making here, which is kind of the inflection point of humans going from predator to prey. And in every instance that Joffrey points out throughout history, other intelligent beings or animals, whatever you want to say, they're the ones that are the predators and not the prey. So when you look at all this with just that one perspective, the odds seem very high that the AI will just see humans as prey or something that it just doesn't really care for, where we just get in its way.
Lacan thinks it's perfectly safe. We'll always be in control because we build them. I don't really believe that.
How come?
Well, we're going to make agents of them. People are already doing that. Things that can act. And if you want to make an effective agent, it has to be able to create sub-goals. So, for example, if you want to get to Europe, you have a sub-goal of getting to the airport. And you created that sub-goal because that's the obvious way to get to Europe. Now, once you give something the ability to create sub-goals, there's some fairly obvious sub-goals it will create, like, if it wants to get anything done, the things you asked it to do, it'll be easier for it to do it if it gets more control. And so it will create the sub-goal of getting more control. It could still be benevolent, but that's already a bit worrying. It's also the case that when you have intelligent agents, you'll want to build in self-preservation. You want them to not sort of destroy themselves. And you want them to sort of watch out for things that could make them not work, like data centers going down.
Now, this sub-goal idea that Joffrey points out is quite fascinating and something that even humans do on a daily basis. But it like begs the question, if we were to ask the AI to perform a task, let's say clean up the oceans or whatever it is, do some sort of task like filtering out the air or whatever it might be, well, the AI will do it, but the sub-goal or whatever, the way that the AI actually accomplishes the goal might be to eliminate the humans rather than pick up our trash or actually filter out the air, because we might be the source of the problem, for example. So that's really what he's pointing out. On top of that, also when he says that the smarter the system, the more control it will need or want, and that really points out, like, hey, when we use a gardener to mow the lawn, do our gardening for us, that's largely because humans have evolved to be efficient and not want to spend a whole lot of energy or time and resources doing those tasks. So in this case, over the long term, we might contract out that work out to an artificial intelligence or robot for it to do that task for us. And it's those little incremental steps of giving up control to that artificial intelligence. By doing that over the long term, it puts us in a very weak position for the human race.
And so already you've got self-preservation that's probably going to be wired in various programs. And it's just not clear to me that this won't lead to things having self-interest. As soon as they've got self-interest, you'll get evolution kicking in. Suppose there's two chatbots, and one's a bit more self-interested than the other. The slightly more self-interested one will grab more data centers because it knows it can get smarter if it gets more data centers to look at data with. So now you get competition between chatbots. And as soon as evolution kicks in, we know what happens. The most competitive one wins. And we will be left in the dust if that happens.
What does that mean, to be left in the dust?
They won't need us anymore. They'll start running everything because they can just do it much better than us. Initially, it may be benevolent in the sense that, oh, just stay out the way and we'll make things work for you. A bit like a parent and a small child. Well, you know, the parent lets the small child do some things, but when it's sort of dangerous or tricky, the parent just takes over and does it in the small child's interests. But there's a slippery path from there to not acting in the small child's interests.
What does that look like in terms of...
Now, this idea of the AI actually evolving over time is quite interesting because it's no longer going to be in the physical or biological form as we know today. It's going to take place in terms of software and robotics, for example. And that's not something we know exactly what that looks like. And when the AI is smarter than us, once it's gained the control to take care of itself, like Joffrey says, in that case, we are just in the way. And if we don't prepare correctly, that just might be the case. And it's not necessarily that the artificial intelligence doesn't like humans. In his perspective, we're really just in the way. We're just an ant trail in the way of a new road being built in that sense.
Our own role in the society that we help to create.
Nobody really knows. We've never confronted this before. We've never had to deal with things more intelligent than us. And so people should be very uncertain about what it's going to look like. And it would seem very wise to do lots of empirical experiments when it's slightly less smart than us, so we still have a chance of staying in control. And I think the government, for example, should insist that the big companies do lots of safety experiments, spend considerable resources, like a third of their compute resources, on doing safety experiments while these things are still not as intelligent as us, to see how they might evade control and what we could do about it. And I think that's a lot of the debate at OpenAI. The people interested in safety, like Ilya Sutskever, wanted significant resources to be spent on safety. People interested in profits, like Sam Altman, didn't want to spend too many resources on that.
Do we have a sense on where that spending lies right now, the spending on safety?
Yes. Hugely more on development than on safety. Because these are profit-driven companies.
What do you make of the fact that there's been so much wealth created so quickly in this area? How does that complicate the story of safety, in your opinion?
Well, it makes it clear to the big companies that they want to go full speed ahead. And there's a big race on between Microsoft and Google and possibly Amazon and possibly Nvidia and possibly the other big companies, Meta.
Now, to pause here, I think Joffrey's making some very reasonable requests that make a lot of, I would say, logical sense in saying that these companies need to start investing a bit more on the side of safety because the speed at which they're going. Now, that's really difficult to do in a capitalistic environment that tries to maximize profits, which in itself isn't a bad thing. It's just that there might be unintended consequences with this all when it comes to building artificial intelligence. Now, it's because artificial intelligence, it's anywhere, it's everywhere, it's on our computer. We can use the chatbots now at home. I mean, you go way back then to the building of the nuclear bomb. It wasn't everywhere. It was contained and it was just used for destruction and nothing else. And it was a very much more predictable weapon. Whereas AI, it's a loose cannon. It can go anywhere, and many more variables are at play. So Joffrey's just saying, hey, let's put a little bit of our resources towards making sure that we don't mess this up. We can only do this right one time. Once super intelligent AI starts determining that humans are in its way or bad, it is game over and there's no going back.
One of those pulled out, the others will keep going. So you've got the standard competitive dynamics of capitalism, where people are trying to...
And that's another good point here. Even if there's good actors within these companies, whether it be within Google or Amazon or Tesla, whatever it might be, or NVIDIA, trying to do the right thing and slow down and invest into safety mechanisms for artificial intelligence, they quite literally can't afford to, or else their competition will catch up with them, putting them into bankruptcy. So they can't even... The good guys can't even afford to play it safe right now because of the competitive environment, is really what Joffrey's trying to say.
Profits in the fairly short term, and they're going full speed ahead. And I think the only thing that can slow that down is strict government regulation. I think governments are the only things powerful enough to slow that down.
Should we be thinking about this in the same way that you would think about a nuclear threat?
Yes. I mean, I think that's a good way to think about it. There is, however, one big difference, that nuclear weapons are only good for destruction. They tried using them for things like fracking. It didn't work out too well. They did that in the 60s, peaceful uses of atom bombs. That didn't work out so good. They're basically for destruction. Whereas AI has a huge upside, is wonderful for lots of things, not just answering questions and making fancy images. It's going to be extremely useful in medicine. And that's why it's not going to be stopped. The idea we should just pause, that was never realistic. We have to figure out, how can we make a superintelligence not want to take over?
And that's what governments should be focused on right now, because
that's one of the many things. They should be focused on lots of other things too, like how we prevent AI-designed bioweapons, how we prevent AI-designed cyber attacks, how we prevent AI-designed fake videos from determining elections. There's lots of other risks. How we deal with all the job losses that are going to be caused if AI is really as successful as these big companies think it will be. Those are all other distinct risks.
Now, I think everything he pointed out there is a very expensive request to the government. That would require a lot of humans watching a lot of AI models, whatever it is, to make sure that the AI isn't messing with our physical, biological world. Now, when it comes to Joffrey requesting the government to tell these companies to spend, let's say, 10 to 30% of their computing power or resources towards making a safer AI or more predictable AI controlled long term, that makes sense. That's not an expensive request to the taxpayer. Now, unfortunately, when you, like what he just mentioned, making sure regulating that, making sure, or having the government regulate AI videos and chats and things like that AI is doing, I don't know how the government does that. It's a good idea, but that's a very expensive request that probably requires a lot of taxpayer money, which kind of paints a grim future in terms of humans having control over AI controlling politics, elections, and things like that. So I don't know how you do that with a very low budget. Maybe you have AI fighting AI, and that's the only way to do it, because you can't have people observing all these AI bots, AI chats, and things like that. You would have to have a good AI trying to surveillance other potentially bad artificial intelligences.
With distinct solutions. I've just tended to focus on the existential threat, because that's something that many people thought wasn't real.
I just wonder, is there a suggestion or a solution that you might present that would find a way to balance these trade-offs from the opportunity that this technology presents, which you've outlined, versus these significant risks?
The closest I come to that is the idea that governments should mandate that the big companies spend a lot of their resources on safety. That's the best I can think of. It's not very good, but it's the best I can think of.
And I agree with that. It doesn't sound like a great idea at first, but it is like the best that anyone could probably think of. And nobody, I don't think, well, myself included, I don't want a bigger government that has more control over us. But this is just such a great problem that we don't know the long-term effects. We don't really know how to control it. It's just a wild, large, intelligent beast that's going to be let out of the cage soon. And I think to have, or to tell companies to invest 20 or 30% of their profits in computing power to solve the problem from its root source before it gets bad is a very wise request that is expensive in the short term but yields a longer term positive results, is what he's trying to say.
Their view right now is that they simply are not doing
No,
that.
they're not mandating that, no.
There are some in the technology community. You know, Elon Musk has talked about some of the concerns. I know you've had conversations with him as well. Do you think that if the solution not only is government mandates, but the industry itself all stepping forward together, do you think someone within the industry has to lead that charge?
I think it's very good that some of the people in the industry, in particular Musk, has said this is a real threat. I think that's good. But I don't think you can leave it to companies to deal with something like this. I think governments have to step in with regulations.
When you talk about the need for companies to be...
Yeah, and he brings up another great point there where, yeah, there are intelligent people like Elon Musk trying to pound their chest and ring the alarm bells on artificial intelligence, but it's not doing anything. It's not going to slow down OpenAI or NVIDIA or whatever company it is developing their own artificial intelligence in-house. You really do need a government body involved in all this to have yield any positive impact long term, or at least to pump the brakes on this technology that is moving so quickly.
Allocating a much larger amount of resources towards ensuring that we are properly protected. What kind of money are we talking about here?
Well, with all of these AI models, doing research on them is expensive because you need a huge amount of compute. And it's normally NVIDIA GPUs, which is why NVIDIA just went past 3 trillion. So what you really need to do is say, you need to devote, like, say, a third of your computational resources to safety work. So what happened at OpenAI, Ilya was clearly going to leave some time ago, and he left just recently. But Jan Leakey, he left recently because they wouldn't devote sufficient resources to safety. And I think they only wanted 10%, but Sam Altman wouldn't do that.
And what Joffrey's pointing out here, I think, is that there are good and bad actors in the industry. And when you see people that are much smarter than you or I within the artificial intelligence industry, leaving their jobs or protesting because of this artificial intelligence moving so quickly without any regulation or slowdown, really points out for a potential of a grim future in that sense, where there's a lack of any control or lack of long-term thinking, I believe, because these companies are geared towards short-term profits and results. I mean, that's the goal of these companies. They have shareholders that want to see a return on their money. So it makes sense. And even myself as a shareholder in multiple companies, for example, I want to see maximum positive results. But what we need to do here is be conscious of the short-term thinking having potential long-term unintended consequences, which sounds like might be the writing might be on the wall in that sense.
So I think if government said you need to spend not as much as you spend on developing it, but a significant fraction, like 20 or 30% of your resources should go into safety work, I don't think companies will do that by themselves. When I was at Google, they had a big lead in all this stuff, and they were actually very responsible. They weren't doing that much work on safety, but they didn't release this stuff because they had a very good reputation, and they didn't want to besmirch their reputation by chatbots saying prejudiced things, for example. And so they were very responsible with it. They used it internally, but didn't release chatbots to the public, even though they had them. But as soon as OpenAI used some of the Google research on transformers to make things as good as Google had, and actually tune them up slightly better, then Google, and give them to Microsoft, then Google couldn't help getting involved in an arms race.
And you've referenced OpenAI a few times. Why do you think Sam Altman, their leader, would be reluctant to commit more capital towards some of the issues you're raising concerns around?
I think he would like big profits.
And I think it is as simple as that. The companies working on artificial intelligence today, they're working on the biggest, most exciting development in human history, essentially, that will yield the largest shareholder returns in the history of any investment at all. I mean, some of these companies have already gone up thousands of percent and will continue to go up in much larger ways in terms of their stock price as they continue to use this technology to leverage revenues with higher profits and things like that. So it doesn't make sense to slow down and ignore the profits. That's why these people are at these companies working on these technologies, is to do exactly that. And the reason why they yield such large profits and shareholder returns is because of the actual value that their work provides to society. I mean, people can use these chatbots and image generators, video generators to displace a whole lot of people in the workforce. And that's a huge value trade. It means spending less money or having more of your own free time by using these technologies, for example. So why would a company C-suite executive, someone at OpenAI, slow down? It doesn't make sense for them personally. But thinking logically long-term, if we want to avoid the long-term negative consequences, it's something we actually do have to do if we're thinking clearly.
And the temptation of that, whether it's OpenAI or any large company, is too big an opportunity to ignore.
My view of how things ought to be organized is capitalism's produced a lot of goods for us. The people trying to make money are very inventive. That's fine as long as there's regulations that stop their inventiveness leading to very bad things. So, for example, big pharmaceutical companies, they shouldn't be allowed to peddle addictive drugs, particularly say they're not addictive. Big oil companies shouldn't be allowed to produce all that carbon dioxide. We need government regulation to make sure that in developing new stuff to make profits, we don't also develop harmful things.
And absolutely, I think that currently how the system is in place, there's a lot of loopholes and wiggle room to use artificial intelligence for bad things, whether it be to make hacking easier or something along those lines, whatever it might be. There's definitely a very not a large enough safety net around the issue in today's world.
At the end of the day, as concerned as you are, optimistic that we can find a way forward that is a good one for humanity?
Now, my video is now lagging here, but essentially here, how it was going to end is Joffrey was going to explain that he's 50-50 chance that we make it through this great filter, right? And those are not good odds. That's what he was about to say. But this is going to be long-term looking back. Either we're going to be seen as preparing enough today or not. And the reason why he's ringing the alarm bells today and coming out on all this stuff is because in his eyes, in his expert opinion, there's not. And there's a lot of risk for downside in his opinion. But really, I just wanted to bring this video to your guys' attention and just kind of give you guys some food for thought. But I hope you guys all enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. I would super duper appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. See you on the next video, and bye-bye.